The story opens in a small, overcrowded courtroom in a southern town known for its old-school legal system and traditionalist values. The atmosphere is thick with tension, not from a high-profile murder case or corporate scandal, but from a surprisingly minor incident. A black man named Michael Raines is on trial for assault. Michael, tall and composed, stands silently at the defendant's table. He is dressed simply, not in a flashy suit, but in a clean, understated shirt and slacks. His posture is upright, his eyes calm, and his hands neatly folded. There's a quiet discipline in the way he carries himself, though no one in the room seems to notice or care. At the bench sits Judge Wallace Greer, a man in his late 60s with a scowl permanently etched into his face. Known for his loud voice and harsher-than-necessary rulings, Greer has a long history of ruling disproportionately harshly against people of color. Today is no different. As soon as the court is in session, Judge Greer doesn't waste time pretending this will be fair. He begins by questioning Michael's character, loudly and with condescension. "Another one of you people thinking you can walk around breaking the law," he bellows. "What were you doing in that neighborhood in the first place?" The courtroom murmurs. The young public defender beside Michael attempts to object, but Greer cuts her off. "Save your breath, counselor. This one's a lost cause," he says, nodding toward Michael like he's already handed down the sentence. Michael remains silent. He doesn't flinch, doesn't argue. His expression stays controlled, stoic. Every "yes, Your Honor" from him is delivered with the crispness of a soldier, something that goes unnoticed by the judge but is quietly noted by a few in the back of the courtroom. Veterans, a retired cop, and a curious journalist. The charges sound simple. Michael allegedly struck a man at a gas station, and the local police claim he instigated the fight. What the judge fails to acknowledge is that Michael was attempting to protect a woman from being assaulted, a fact the defense hasn't had the chance to present properly. Greer continues his tirade, mocking Michael's lack of a private attorney, labeling him a thug, and insinuating he's nothing more than a threat to society. The prosecutor, though slightly uncomfortable, says nothing, complicit in the judge's bias, unwilling to rock the boat. For those watching, it feels less like a legal proceeding and more like a public shaming. But through it all, Michael doesn't break his calm. No one in the courtroom knows who he really is. To them, he's just another black man on trial. But behind his composed silence lies a history of bravery, discipline, and national service. As the judge slams his gavel and calls for a recess before sentencing, there's an eerie chill in the air. Something is off. Michael hasn't spoken out, but it's clear from the steel in his eyes. He's not someone to be underestimated. Judge Greer, blinded by his prejudice, is about to make a career-defining mistake, and he has no idea who he's dealing with. As the courtroom takes a recess, Michael Raines sits quietly in his chair, hands still folded, gaze steady. But beneath his still surface, his mind drifts, not to fear, but to memory. This part of the story shifts perspective, taking us into a series of flashbacks that peel back the layers of the man being misjudged by the world around him. We are transported years into the past, deep into the heart of Afghanistan. A younger Michael, suited in tactical Navy SEAL gear, crouches in a remote village at twilight. His team moves with lethal precision, his calm voice guiding them through earpieces. They are tasked with extracting hostages from a Taliban-controlled compound. Michael leads from the front, taking point on the infiltration, his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. Inside, chaos erupts. Michael neutralizes a threat with close-quarters efficiency and finds a group of terrified villagers, including children. He comforts them gently while coordinating their evacuation. The mission is a success, due in large part to his courage, clarity under fire, and refusal to leave anyone behind. This is one of dozens of missions where he put his life on the line, not for medals, not for glory, but because it was his duty. The next flashback shows a darker moment. Michael is back at base, staring silently at the boots and helmet of a fallen teammate. A ceremony is underway. He salutes, stoic but hurting. The loss never leaves him, and it becomes part of his unshakable discipline, a fire that fuels his need to live with purpose. Always. Following this, we see Michael in ADC debriefing room months later. A CIA recruiter sits across from him, impressed by more than his combat record. They note his mastery of multiple languages, his strategic mind, and, most importantly, his loyalty and discretion. Michael is offered an opportunity to serve. Again, this time in a more secretive, complex role. Covert operations for the CIA. Initially hesitant, Michael accepts. He is trained in espionage, surveillance, and non-lethal tactics. Missions follow: destabilizing terrorist networks, extracting defectors, even preventing an international biological weapons plot. These stories never make the news. His name is never mentioned. But without him, countless lives would have been lost. Despite everything, Michael remains humble. He never flaunts his service. He doesn't seek recognition. To the outside world, he's just another face. This is deliberate. His work is too important and too classified to allow for fame. The flashbacks end as we return to the courtroom. Michael is still sitting in his chair, back straight, eyes steady. No one here knows that the man being yelled at was once dropped behind enemy lines under the cover of night, that he held dying friends in his arms, or that he's prevented attacks on American soil. The contrast is striking. A courtroom full of assumptions and ignorance, and a man full of history and sacrifice. This moment sets the emotional tone for what's to come. The world has no idea who Michael Raines really is. But very soon, they're going to find out, and the judge, who belittled him, will be the first to learn the truth. As the courtroom prepares to reconvene after the recess, the audience remains largely unaware of the truth behind Michael Raines' arrest. To most people present, especially Judge Greer, this appears to be an open and shut case of a violent man getting what he deserves. But in reality, the story is far more complex and reveals a justice system built on assumptions rather than facts. The incident that brought Michael into the courtroom began on a quiet Friday evening at a local gas station on the outskirts of town. Michael had been driving through while on leave, passing through the state to visit his aging uncle. He stopped to refuel and grab a bottle of water when he noticed something disturbing near the side of the convenience store. A man, later identified as Connor Dales, a local with multiple prior assault charges, was shouting at a young black woman, aggressively cornering her between a wall and his truck. His body language was threatening, and the woman's pleas to be left alone were ignored. Several bystanders witnessed the confrontation but did nothing, afraid to intervene. Michael, trained in situational awareness and de-escalation tactics, calmly approached the scene. He politely asked the man to step back and let the woman go. Connor responded with racial slurs and shoved Michael. The moment Connor reached for something in his truck, a potential weapon, Michael quickly disarmed and restrained him using minimal force. The woman fled safely into the gas station and called 911, but when local police arrived, they didn't ask questions. They saw two men, one white and bloodied, the other black and calm but imposing. Without checking surveillance or talking to the woman inside, they arrested Michael, labeling him the aggressor based on nothing more than appearance and assumptions. At the police station, Michael remained cooperative, refusing to speak about his background. He didn't demand special treatment or identify himself as a CIA operative. His protocol forbade it. He gave only the necessary information, trusting the system to investigate fairly. But the system didn't. The police filed the report with incomplete testimony. The prosecutor, under pressure to move cases quickly, pursued charges without waiting for security footage or interviewing the female victim who had since left town. Judge Greer, notorious for his swift and biased rulings, set the court date immediately and dismissed Michael's account without hearing the full story. Behind the scenes, however, the truth was beginning to leak out. A gas station clerk remembered Michael's quiet bravery and pulled the surveillance footage, showing the entire incident from Michael's intervention to Connor's aggression. The woman Michael saved had also left a voicemail with the local station praising his actions, calling him a hero in plain clothes. This evidence hadn't yet reached the courtroom, but it was on its way, and so was someone else, Michael's CIA handler, who had just been alerted that a top asset was being wrongly prosecuted. In that courtroom, Michael sits in silence, not because he's weak or defeated, but because he trusts the facts to surface. What no one yet realizes is that this wasn't a fight, it was a rescue. And the wrong man is on trial. As the courtroom reconvenes after recess, the mood is tense, but unchanged. Judge Wallace Greer returns to the bench with a smug air, ready to hand down a sentence he believes is both justified and final. Michael Raines sits stoically at the defense table, still calm, still silent, still misunderstood. However, events are beginning to unfold far beyond Greer's control. Inside a secured government office in Washington, D.C., Michael's CIA handler, Elena Park, receives an urgent alert. Michael, an active field operative working under deep cover, has been detained and is now standing trial. Her expression hardens. His mission was paused for rest and recovery, not to be tangled in local politics. The moment she confirms the charges are false and based on flawed local reporting, she picks up the phone. Elena quickly initiates a national security level intervention. Within hours, a classified file is compiled, containing Michael's military service record, CIA training certifications, intelligence commendations, and his current mission status. This isn't just paperwork. It's a dossier that can shut down a courtroom and end a judge's career if misused. At the same time, an internal DOJ contact reaches out to the courthouse. There is concern not only about the mistreatment of a covert agent, but also the optics of a racially charged trial targeting a decorated veteran. Federal eyes are now watching, and Judge Greer is about to find himself in the crosshairs of a very different level of justice. As the trial resumes, Michael's public defender stands to deliver a final plea for dismissal. But before she can speak, the double doors at the back of the courtroom open. A sharply dressed man in a dark suit, Agent Bryce Keller, a senior DOJ liaison working with the CIA, strides in. He walks straight to the bench, ignoring the glares and whispers from those in attendance. In his hand, the sealed federal file. "Your Honor," Keller says calmly but firmly, "this case has been flagged for immediate federal review. This file contains classified material. You are instructed to read it privately and suspend all proceedings until further notice." Greer's ego flares. "You don't waltz into my courtroom and tell me how to run it," he barks. Keller doesn't flinch. "This isn't about your courtroom anymore, sir. This is about national security." Reluctantly, the judge accepts the file and calls a private recess. Inside his chambers, he opens the dossier, and what he sees changes everything. Decorated Navy SEAL, Bronze Star, CIA operative. Missions in conflict zones that most Americans will never hear of. Intelligence saved. Lives rescued. Threats eliminated. Every page is stamped classified and eyes only. Greer's hands tremble slightly. He begins to understand the magnitude of his error. The man he berated, humiliated, and labeled a criminal has risked his life for the very freedoms the judge claims to defend. Back in the courtroom, whispers spread as Greer returns, his expression shaken and pale. He clears, his throat struggling to find words. This court recognizes that new information has come to light. Charges are hereby dismissed. The room is silent, not out of confusion, but awe. No one knows exactly what just happened, but they all sense the shift. Michael Raines simply nods once. No celebration, no anger. Just dignity, because for him, this was never about revenge. It was about truth, and now the truth is undeniable. The air in the courtroom is electric as Judge Wallace Greer takes his seat once more. Gone is the arrogance that colored his earlier rants. His hands shake slightly as he adjusts his robe, and his once firm voice falters as he speaks. The weight of what he's just read in the CIA dossier crushes the smug confidence he's known for. The man he publicly humiliated, Michael Raines, is not some street criminal or hot-headed brawler. He is a war hero, a decorated Navy SEAL, and now an active CIA operative. For a moment, Greer seems lost, unsure of how to proceed, but federal eyes are watching. Agent Bryce Keller, the DOJ liaison who delivered the sealed file, stands silently at the back of the courtroom. The judge knows any wrong move now could cost him his robe, and more after clearing his throat. Judge Greer makes a subdued statement. New evidence has come to light, and this court acknowledges that continuing this trial is not in the interest of justice. He pauses, glancing at Michael. All charges are dismissed with prejudice. Gasps ripple across the room. The public defender turns to Michael in disbelief and relief, while the prosecutor stares down at his notes. Ashamed. Journalists in the gallery scribble furiously. But perhaps the most profound reaction comes from the judge himself. His face flushed, jaw tight, barely able to meet Michael's eyes. What follows isn't just a dismissal. It's a quiet. Reckoning. Michael rises, still composed, still silent. He doesn't gloat or speak, but his presence, dignified and grounded, becomes a silent indictment of everything this courtroom did wrong. The man they tried to reduce to a stereotype stands now as a symbol of strength, discipline, and service. Greer, clearly rattled, attempts to maintain face. "You're free to go, Mr. Raines," he says, almost choking on the words. But Agent Keller isn't finished. He steps forward and places a hand on the bench. "Your Honor," Keller says calmly, "this incident will be reviewed internally. Expect follow-up from the Department of Justice and Ethics Committee." The judge nods stiffly. It's clear that the humiliation he feels now is only the beginning of a much larger fallout. Outside the courthouse, the body cam and surveillance footage from the gas station, now retrieved and authenticated, is leaked to the media. The footage clearly shows Michael acting to protect a woman from harassment, showing restraint even when provoked. Public outrage builds overnight. Social media erupts with hashtags like #JusticeForRaines and #HonorMichael. Calls for Judge Greer's removal flood state offices. News pundits begin highlighting the miscarriage of justice. The story becomes national. A black CIA agent wrongly arrested, berated in court, and vindicated by the truth. Meanwhile, Michael doesn't engage with reporters or the media frenzy. He vanishes back into the shadows where he works best. For him, vindication isn't about public attention. It's about integrity. But for Judge Greer, the fallout is far more visible. A formal ethics complaint is filed within days. Past cases he presided over are now under review. His days on the bench are numbered. the courtroom tried to break Michael Raines. Instead, it exposed the system's deepest flaws and shined a light on a quiet warrior who never needed to raise his voice to win the battle. The courtroom is quiet now. The tension that once crackled like a live wire has dissolved, replaced by stunned silence and whispered conversations. Michael Raines has left the room with quiet dignity, having said nothing and needing to say nothing. His silence spoke, louder than the judge's rage, the prosecution's indifference, and the courtroom's initial doubt. But outside those walls, the real storm is only beginning. Within hours, clips from the trial begin to surface online. Though the CIA file remains sealed, a journalist who witnessed the proceeding leaks a powerful account of what happened. A federal agent stormed the courtroom. The judge suddenly reversed his entire stance, and a black defendant once called a thug was quietly released and treated with reverence. The sudden shift makes the public hungry for answers. Then the security footage from the gas station is released anonymously. It shows, without question, that Michael had not only acted in self-defense but had protected a woman from being assaulted. His movements were precise and calm, his force controlled. He subdued the aggressor with the expertise of someone highly trained. The woman, though gone, had called the store manager the day after the arrest to say, "That man saved my life." Now, the narrative explodes. News anchors across networks pick up the story. Civil rights advocates, veterans organizations, and even former CIA officers, carefully avoiding classified detail, begin speaking out. They call him a hero, not just for his actions at the gas station, but for how he carried himself in court. Never revealing who he was, never begging for mercy. Just standing tall, letting the truth come when it was ready. Judge Wallace Greer, meanwhile, finds himself under fire. An ethics committee begins an internal review. Multiple civil rights groups submit formal complaints citing a history of racially biased rulings. Footage of him shouting at Michael circulates online, paired with side-by-side comparisons of his lenient treatment of white defendants. Protesters begin appearing outside the courthouse, calling for his resignation. The message is clear. The people want accountability. Greer tries to push back, claiming ignorance, blaming the system, but it's too late. The DOJ's investigation expands, uncovering past decisions rooted in prejudice. Faced with growing public pressure and federal scrutiny, he is suspended from the bench pending review, a quiet way of removing him without outright scandal. As for Michael, he vanishes once more into the world of classified work. The CIA doesn't allow its operatives to give interviews or attend press conferences. But inside Langley, his name is quietly elevated, his record updated with another entry. Handled civilian trial with restraint under duress. Operational cover preserved. The woman he saved eventually writes a powerful op-ed in a major paper titled "The Man Who Protected Me and Protected a Nation." In it, she recounts his calm bravery and reflects on how the justice system nearly failed him. "He never asked for thanks," she writes, "but I will spend the rest of my life telling people what he did." Michael Raines becomes a symbol, not just of strength, but of principle. A man who fought wars abroad and prejudice at home, and never needed a medal to prove he mattered. Because true heroes don't need to shout. They just stand, and the world eventually catches up.